So I'd like to introduce our second speaker, who is going to take us through transformative leadership. It's in the person of Dr. Sakah Nsaidzedze. Is a Cameroonian with a PhD and master's degree in governance and regional integration from Pan-African Union under the auspices of the African Union Commission. Dr. Sakah is a master's distinction in self-governance, productivity, management, and leadership from the Global Entrepreneurs Institute of USA. He is also a BS and diploma holder in management, project management, in sociology and anthropology, and an international certified coach at the Global Entrepreneurs Institute in the USA. He's an author of several scientific publications and a university lecturer. He's a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Leadership and Governance, USA. He's also a director of public relations for CILG Africa. Without much ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Sakah, who is our next speaker. Thank you so much, and I wish you a great delivery, Dr. Sakah.
Thank you, Genevieve, for that. Pleasure for me to join you all, and I want to say good morning, good afternoon, wherever we are. And I'm sure that Dr. Justine has actually done justice to usher us into the conversation, which I hope we can be having in less than 30 minutes so that we can engage more, because the world of technology, the world of emerging technologies and transformational change is a world of engagement. It's a world of practice. It's a world of strategic thinking, and of course, a world of pragmaticians. And without much ado, we obviously have heard over the past 3 days, the importance of having leaders who are creative, leaders who are innovative, leaders who are able to pursue clear vision as far as enhancing productivity is concerned. And this is why, if we must have such leadership in Africa, then we also must be thinking about how such leadership can make good use of emerging technologies, if at all they have not been doing so. And this is the reason why in the next couple of minutes, we should be able to see if Africa has been able to join the rest of the world as far as the very effort towards transforming our workspace is concerned. And it's interesting, of course, to observe that within the context of COVID-19, the world, more than ever before, saw the need to embrace digital technologies. But then the question is, how many of us are online? Right now, we have over 40-something of us attending this summit. But there are over 1 billion Africans who would have had access to such resources, to such knowledge, and be able to transform themselves and be able to engage in strategic leadership and management, as Dr. Justine was emphasizing. But they do not have access to such resourceful information and, of course, trainings like what we are having right now. And the question is, how soon can we expect Africa to be able to embrace emerging technologies to pursue the much desired transformation, positive change that we are yearning for? And I'm happy that Prof. Nana yesterday shared quite extensively when it comes to strategic leadership as well. And today, when it comes to emerging technologies, the question is, what are these technologies? Who obviously can be at the origin of such? We're talking about tools, we're talking about ideas, we're talking about knowledge, we're talking about concepts. We're talking about ideas that are able to transform. We're talking about efforts that help us, or that can help us to transform from the classical way of doing things to more more efficient ways of doing things. And this is what we're looking at when it comes to emerging technologies. And of course, another question we will be asking ourselves is, who should embrace emerging technologies? And do we have such leaders in Africa that are willing to embrace these technologies? What does it take? Do we have creative leaders across Africa? Do we have leaders with vision? Do we have leaders who are ready to engineer growth across the continent? Because if today we still talk of Africa amongst those poorest continents, among those with the wretched of the earth, as Dr. Justine actually demonstrated, despite the resources we have, the question then is, are we not able to invent? Are we not thinking? Are we not able to come up with ideas that can help the continent transform its resources, transform its people, transform its own environment into the much desired solutions that address prevailing challenges across the continent? And this is, again, the reason why we should be able to lay more emphasis on the need to have transformational leaders in the continent. And I'm sure that by much focus would be on leaders that are ready, willing, and committed to driving the change that we are talking about, but of course, very few people ready to embark on it. Today, again, we are all aware that the past 4 months have been plagued by COVID, and this has not let any continent or country out. Yes, the gravity to which countries are affected may be different, but we also know that emerging technologies have been among the highest hopes or source of hope for us as far as addressing COVID-19 pandemic is concerned. We're talking about vaccines, we're talking about the treatment, we're talking about the different ways of preventing COVID-19. But then, what is Africa's contribution in this effort? And how do we see the role of different emerging technologies in addressing such pandemics as COVID? We have had Ebola. We continue to have cholera, including in my country, Cameroon. We also continue to have re-emergence of other diseases across the continent. And we all know that various technologies are capable of addressing these diseases, these pandemics, these development challenges. And again, in the corporate space, it is even more important because today, any organization that is not embracing digital technologies, that is not embracing emerging technologies in one way or the other, is actually self-eliminating itself from the corporate space. And when we look, whether in terms of education, and we're talking about e-learning or distant learning, we're talking about the health, telemedicine, pharmaceutical inventions, we're talking about the economy. With COVID, most of us have been forced to work from home. Most of us have been forced to change our ways of doing things. Whether willingly or unwillingly, COVID obliged us to do. We have been able to change our social networks, our social capital, our social relations. Politically, we have been obliged to change even some of our ways or practices of enhancing democracy, of governance, of government, and all of that. But the question is, to what extent has Africa and its leaders been able to enhance as well as to experience such transformation? Because just about 400 million Africans are online. And when it comes to those who are able to work from home, how many of us in Africa can boast of access to internet? How many of us across Africa can boast of the capacity to afford internet even where it exists? And how many of us across Africa can boast of having electricity to power the service delivery that we would love to, even in our corporate spaces or from our respective institutions. So we see that embracing emerging technologies for transformation, it's inevitable, but then when it comes to Africa, the big question remains as to whether we are closer or close enough to embracing such technologies, and of course, the challenge as to how much more we still need to do to be able to fit ourselves into the world of emerging technologies as well as reap the benefit. But the challenge comes back to each and every one of us. Yes, we may think of leadership and we start thinking of our government. But like Prof. Nana said yesterday, and of course, Dr. Justine emphasizing today, each and every one of us is a leader in our own right. So what is the role we are all playing as far as either inventing, fostering, investing, or enhancing the use of emerging technologies to address prevailing challenges plaguing the continent is concerned? Or do we have such leadership that is ready to foster the use of emerging technologies in addressing the various developmental challenges across the continent? These are just points of reflection. And like I said, I would rather want to trigger a conversation with you all so that at the end of the day, we engage, because the world of digital technologies is a world of engagement. It's a world of practice. It's a world that each and everyone has to fit him or herself into through our actions and not just talking from behind the scenes. So I would rather prefer we exchange. And that is why when you look at most organizations today, you see that most top executives are already claiming to be embracing the various digital technologies to be able to meet their customer demands. Even some governments as well are thinking or even already arguing that they've embraced these digital technologies. And that is why from the beginning, I highlighted the question of e-government, e-governance, because when we're looking at embracing digital technologies in different spheres of life, and of course, development, we have to look at who is doing what, to what extent, and how. And of course, in the corporate world, business operators are looking at how, of course, these technologies benefit them, and that determines the extent to which they invest in this. Governments are looking at the extent to which also the various digital technologies and ideas can enhance their service delivery to the citizens. But the question is, each and every one of these stakeholders, are they doing enough to embrace the various technologies in a way that enhances their service delivery either to clients or to citizens across the continent? And of course, as we reflect on this, another question would be, how prepared are clients and citizens to be able to receive services delivered to them via these digital technologies? How digitally empowered are the citizens, are the clients across Africa to make use, if not contribute, towards the use of emerging technologies across the continent? And we've seen that the world is coming from an era of far less technological inventions to one that is increasingly digitalizing. And where are we along this curve? Because today we are even talking already of artificial intelligence. We're talking of robotics. We're talking of all of these inventions. And when we look at Africa, we should be able to ask ourselves, what exactly are our own inventions? What exactly are the emerging technologies we have from the continent? Or what is our contribution as far as the various technologies are concerned? And if we don't get to have convincing answers to these questions, then it tells us more or about the challenge that lies ahead of us as leaders to be able to see how soon we can embrace efforts towards enhancing inventions, but most importantly, the use of various digital technologies. And like I said, I don't want it to look like a blame game or to look at leaders more of those in government and such decision-making circles. I want to challenge each and every one of us as leaders in our own right that we've been talking of in the past 3 days to see what contribution we are making as far as enhancing the various emerging technologies are concerned. But again, another question to be asking ourselves is, why should we embrace emerging technologies? I am sure that if this summit were to be organized maybe in Ghana, in Tanzania, in Uganda, not up to 10 of us would be able to support our cost to attend. But today, here we are, over 40 something, attending this summit in the past 3 days. It is obviously cost effective, irrespective of the fact that accessing internet, purchasing maybe the various digital devices to have access to such a summit comes with a cost. But it is far less compared to if we had to maybe pay a flight, engage on other expenses as far as logistics are concerned. And this is to tell you that embracing digital technologies or emerging technologies in one way or the other is actually embarking on a journey that is highly argued to be cost effective. In terms of efficiency, of course, results that are produced, results that are delivered with the use of various technologies comparatively outweigh those that we have been able to produce in several cycles without such. There is more interaction as far as colleagues are concerned. Yesterday, Dr. Asare mentioned that directors of CILG across Africa have been having a series of working sessions. This will not be possible if we do not have technologies, including, of course, social media and platforms like Zoom now. And this has again been demonstrated clearly during this context of COVID. Many governments have been able to organize summits, organize ministerial meetings, business summits have been organized via online platforms. Many deals have been struck or negotiated with the use of these online platforms or digital technologies. But then the question is, who are those with the privilege of either investing, inventing, or consuming these digital technologies? Because in Africa, we know very well that most of our own role when it comes to these digital technologies is about consuming, it's about being at the receiving point. But then to benefit from this era of emerging technologies, we have to be able to invent and bring on board something that at the end of the day would not help us only to transform our service delivery, but most importantly, to also attract some revenue, whether as an organization, whether as a government or country. But how many African countries are already at that stage? If we're talking about drones, how many of our countries are using them yet? How many of us or our countries are inventing them yet? We're talking about vaccines. How many African countries have been able to develop some of them? And in the context of COVID, one that also can help in mitigating the very effects of COVID-19. I hear South Africa is making some good efforts in that respect. When it comes to maybe traditional medicines, some of our practitioners have been trying to invent. But is that enough? Because we've had quite a gamut of challenges plaguing our developmental efforts across the continent. And we're all saying that embracing these digital technologies is about looking at the time also that we can use to produce better results than manual production, for instance. We're looking about mitigating or limiting bureaucratic practices. If you look at most of the development challenges across Africa, you understand that most governments are very bureaucratic, and this in itself has been also at the root cause of some of the corrupt or corruption allegations that we've had. But with digital technologies, most of them do not only help to decentralize efforts of reaching out, of participating in governance processes, but they help to enhance transparency. They help to enhance participation of citizens in their own very decision-making and practices or development efforts. And most importantly, the time that is taken to deliver services or to achieve results as far as development efforts across the continent are concerned. And again, like I said from the beginning, emerging technologies are there to engage us, and engaging us in a way that no one can be left behind if at all they are willing to. If it comes to banking services, we know very well that most of it across the world today is going digital. But get back to Africa and you take a survey of how many countries in Africa are able to do digital banking, how many of them are able, or how many Africans are able to do online businesses, how many Africans are able to purchase or sell their online platforms. What is stopping us? Ask yourself, why the corruption? If you take most of our African continent, you would see that even governments that are willing to improve on service delivery, for instance, do not want to even digitalize these processes just because they want to shield some of those corrupt practices. But digitalizing them or coming up with inventions that help to facilitate, digitalize, and enhance this service delivery actually mitigates a lot. You take drones, for instance. In the context of COVID-19, we've been able to have drones deliver testing kits, prevention kits across continents or countries, including, of course, Rwanda. And you see that the number of people that are able to have access to services with the use of drones, for instance, is far more than those that our medical personnel who are in actually limited supply would be able to deliver within a given period of time. And this is to tell you that the more we are able to embrace such technologies, the more we can enhance service delivery. And are we conscious about all of these advantages of emerging technologies? Are we in possession, or are we transformational leaders in Africa? Do we have a vision where we're leading our people to? Because with emerging technologies, we are always capable of imagining, we are always able to create, and of course, to invent and have the capacity to address several problems that, of course, may emerge in our communities or countries, as well as organizations. But then many of us have argued also that many of the challenges that are prevailing across maybe the cyberspace are not in any way in favor of us enhancing or embracing some of these digital technologies. Of course, we know about various cyber threats, insecurity, the cost, which I've mentioned, of accessing internet services, for instance, of even getting maybe digitally empowered, because most of our African people are obviously still plagued by digital illiteracy, and many of our rural populations do not even have access to constant power or electricity supply. And of course, we know about the digital divide, because embracing digital technologies is also about looking at who is embracing or who is contributing what. And the question we're looking at from a developmentalist perspective is, are there women or African men who are more into these technologies or contributing more or using more? Who has more access? Who is able to afford? Who is using these technologies more? And for what purposes? We look at another challenge from a perspective of transborder crimes. And this is actually one of those that those who are not in favor of some of these technologies may argue that it is better we continue with our classical ways of doing things than to embrace digital technologies. But the question is, shall we emerge? Shall we achieve or attain the much talked about emergence or prosperity of Africa if we are not able to embrace the various technologies? We equally have issues related to misinformation, fake news, but most importantly, we lack the digital infrastructure, because to embrace digital technologies also comes with investing more in these digital infrastructures, which most of our African countries don't have. But the question is, who should invest in this infrastructure? And even where they exist, how do we use them? And what is the contribution of Africa as far as investment as well as development of digital infrastructure is concerned? Because a greater challenge even is that of resistance. Most of our African leaders, including in our small organizations, are resistant to embracing or diffusing innovations, diffusing new ideas, and that is why we want to do things the way we've been doing them and to be the only ones shining and receiving awards like Dr. Justine was saying. But if we embrace digital technologies, if we embrace or if we're ready to invent, if we're ready to embrace new ideas from colleagues, from citizens, from clients, the transformation does not only take place at the level of our organizations, but of course, it has far-reaching implications across the board. And this is the more reason why, if we cannot change our attitude, if we cannot change our mindset, if we cannot change our commitment, the level of commitment to be able to embrace, invest, and of course, do all possible to foster digital technologies across the continent, we would remain where we are while the world is advancing. But the fact remains that emerging technologies are an ever unfolding process, just like I think Dr. Segun emphasized that change is a process and always will it be, so too are emerging technologies. We have to innovate because change is inevitable. And for any leader who claims credit for being transformational, for any leader who wants to transform his or her organization, his or her community or country, there is no way you can resist innovations or new ideas and think that you would transform, because you would be doing the same things over and over and expecting different results, and that is not possible. And again, there would always be that need for us to think out of the box. It is true that we can say this easily, but very few leaders are able to think out of the box, and that is the more reason why transformational leaders are those who are able to think out of the box. And when you think out of the box, that is when you have the chance to create, you have the chance to innovate, you have the chance to do something different and achieve different results. And this comes if you're capable as a government, as an organization, of investing in research. How many times do your workers or colleagues go on maybe training? How regularly go on training? How much do you base your service delivery on evidence from the field? And how capable are you of empowering your colleagues and of course your citizens, to the extent that if it comes to getting feedback, if it comes to receiving even the service you're delivering, for instance, through digital platforms, they're capable of receiving such and appreciating or giving you feedback. All of this to tell you that digital technologies, emerging technologies are there, but it's left onto us to see if we have to evolve with the times, evolve with the changing technological innovations or inventions. And today we're talking about 5G, but of course some of our countries are still at the level of 2G, some are at 3, 4. But when we move across the continent, how many of us are sure that our people are able to reap the benefit of these digital innovations or evolution? And how many of us, especially in Africa, are contributing towards this and benefiting from it. Artificial technology, artificial intelligence, this is the way to go. The gateway to many of our problems is, of course, these emerging technologies. But at what stage of technological innovations are we? Where do we intend to be? Because as leaders, we also need to have a vision as to where we want to take our organizations, our countries to. But from a technological perspective, where is that vision leading us to? Are we capable of maybe the foresight that various technological innovations and of course artificial intelligence can help us to be able to make? Or do we want to remain traditional but expect to reap the fruits of those who have evolved digitally? How is our interaction with our workers? Do we know and are we capable of enhancing such interaction with colleagues, whether offline, online, when it comes to service delivery, as well as with our clients or citizens? Do we even care about the feedback that comes from citizens or clients or colleagues at the level of our organizations? But all of this are simplified if we're able to invent, if we're able to embrace new ideas, if we're able to embrace new technologies to enhance this. And obviously, we don't want to lay more emphasis on social media and, of course, the role it's playing in enhancing interaction, in enhancing service delivery across the board. But the major question I continue to ask is, where are we in Africa? Where do we want to be as far as digital technologies are concerned? And are we ready to embrace the challenge, the responsibility to become those transformational leaders, especially when it comes to making use of the various technological innovations that are out there and that we are supposed to contribute to? And so, like I said, it's about engaging in a conversation. And I'm sure that when it comes to emerging technologies, we know that these are the gateway to the kind of challenges that the world is facing today, including, of course, COVID. The corporate space today, more than ever before, needs all of these emerging technologies than has been the case before. And most importantly, any transformational leader worth the salt should and must not be reminded that digital technologies and emerging technologies are the gateway to go, but this will not happen if such leaders are not willing to take action to invest and foster, of course, efforts towards these emerging technologies. And at that point, I'd like to hear more, your comments, of course, and questions so that we can interact more using very digital platforms that we've been engaged in over the past 3 days. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sakah. Thank you so much for such a great delivery. Thank you. So I would want to give a few of our audience the privilege to contribute before we ask questions. His Royal Highness, I don't know if you would want to contribute to anything. It can be either from Dr. Sakah's or the previous presentation. Please, the floor is open for contribution. Thank you.
Okay, we have two of them. We have His Royal Highness Oladale Oladuntun Surojidin. Forgive me if I don't get the name correct, but sir, if you are there and you want to give us any contribution, the floor is open. Let me also recognize the presence of Prof Olubode. Okay, he's also a fellow. Prof, you are welcome. If you also have any contribution, kindly bring on board. His Royal Highness Oladale Olasuji is also with us. So the floor is open.
Thank you, Dr. Asare Bediako.
You can kindly unmute yourself if you want to make the contribution, please.
Hello,
Okay,
Madam
Mr.
Genevieve.
Tabani. Okay. Hello, kindly go ahead.
Okay, please. Thank you, Dr. Sakah, for such a thought-provoking presentation. I have a question, as well as I'm also sharing an experience as a telecommunications engineer who has worked on several platforms within the country of Ghana. My question is in relation to a report that was shared by the Broadband Commission for Sustainable Development to World Bank Group. That is somewhere in October 2019. Now, in that report, the report did mention that less than 1/3 of the population of Africa has access to broadband connectivity. And so, to be able to achieve affordable and good quality internet access by 2030 will require an investment of $100 billion. So laying this as a background for my submission, I would like to say that year in, year out, with the telecommunications industry, I know in Ghana, we periodically, as regional engineers, perform what we call a network audit with regards to revenue. And then we are able to classify some of the sites into two key areas. Now, the first one, we call it LUS, that is low utilization sites. Now, basically what it means is that in terms of the number of subscribers to that network service within that area, they are not able to use much of the resources per configuration or allocation to that specific area. Now, which also means that this also links to another form of classification, which we call the LRS. That's the low revenue sites. Now, what it means is that if you compare the CAPEX, capital expenditure, that is involved in maintaining that particular site on a daily basis to the revenue that is generated by virtue of usage by network subscribers, you can see that there is a huge gap, which means therefore that the operator is losing. Mind you, some of these sites are actually located in the remotest part of our country, which means that there is poor access to electricity or none at all, which means these sites are running on generator and fuel for 24 hours each day. Now, my question is, in as much as per the regulator laws, like NCA in Ghana, National Communications Authority, it is a law that every operator must have access or presence in every part of the country. But this is a huge cost they are also incurring by virtue of meeting that standard, which means that there's a huge poverty in Africa. So my question with regards to the foundation I laid, as we needing about $100 billion in able to push as investment to build a strong infrastructure for a universal access to broadband connectivity in Africa, how can we realize this? And what should be the role of organizations, as in private entities, vis-a-vis the government institutions to be able to realize this? Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I didn't get your name, but thank you so much for the contribution and the question. Dr. Sakah, please, will you take the question, please? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Kwame, for that question. And I'm very happy that you shared perspectives and experiences from Ghana, which are, of course, almost similar to those from some countries across the continent. And I think this question can be summarized from a perspective of the needed investments or funding that is needed as far as digital infrastructure is concerned. And of course, politicians have been talking about this, and that is why if you look at the African Union Agenda 2063, this is one of the priority domains of investment for that agenda and of course the continent. But when we come down to the respective governments, you would see that there is also disparity in terms of which countries are investing in such digital infrastructure yet. And I think countries like South Africa, for instance, are advancing. If you look at countries like those in the Maghrebian region, they are advancing. But in terms of the specific corporate entities, I think that each stakeholder has a role to play with respect to the interest also they have in this digital infrastructure. And that is why personally, I think that it's about each and every person assuming their leadership role to see what they can contribute. And of course, starting with our government, being able to walk their talk rather than simply talking and talking and talking without action. Because if you look at the other countries we admire or reference in the West, they are investing in this digital infrastructure. I mentioned 5G, of course, cognizant of the polemics that surround it. But then, when you look across the continent, how many of our leaders are even aware of the importance of maybe such internet, maybe evolution or service and all of that? And without being aware of the benefits of this, you see that it will be difficult for them to invest in such infrastructure. And that is why digital literacy campaigns are even still needed for, let's say, government. But in terms of maybe corporate practitioners, I think that they should be at the forefront of investing in the digital technologies that are useful in transforming their entities. And with results from such, I think they can inspire others also to join in the race or in those efforts. Because this, I think 100 billion plus is not any little amount of funding. And so this can only come if all stakeholders are contributing their own share as per, of course, the interest that they have in the entire process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sakah. I have a question from His Royal Highness. He asked, it's a fact that data gathering and data analysis is the bedrock of disruptive or digital technologies. Where do we start from? Presenting current scenario in Africa. Thank you.
Can I get the question again, please?
Okay. He asked, it's a fact that data gathering and data analysis is the bedrock of disruptive or digital technologies. Where do we start from? Presenting current scenario in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Royal Highness, for that very important question again. And I think that to me, it may still come back to the question of us realizing the benefits of digital technologies, realizing the important role that they play in transforming our production process, and whether in the domain of research, whether in the domain of productivity, in our companies, in our corporations, in our government, we obviously understand that we have to rather consider the importance of this to guide us, of course, in the process that would, push us to invest and then embark in any stage of it. And I think research would be key in this, because it is from research and innovations that anything to do with data gathering and, of course, all the disruptive processes and analysis and all of that would also come into play. But if we're not able to invest in research, you would see that we would continue to be lacking. So where to start from, I think it's about maybe sensitization, or maybe engaging with those that have actually advanced in the process. And this is inevitable, because we need to be able to collaborate with countries that are also advancing well in this technological skills or inventions, either from across the continent or beyond, so that we can get maybe to be somewhere. I hope I answered the question, Your Royal Highness.
I'll just add to that question briefly. Yes.
I'd like to make some contribution.
Yes, I think I would. Yes, Daniel, Daniel, you'll be given a chance to make the contribution, but let me read out this question. Dr. Justine, there's a question here for you, so that when you're making your contribution, you answer that one as well. And Dr. Sakah, there's also a question here for you, so that you answer, you write your questions down. After that, we'll allow Prof. Olubode to also come in. Then we'll take the various contributions because our time is almost up. Dr. Justine, this question goes to you. This one is from our social media, those who are watching us on Facebook. Said, how do we develop our organizational capacities? How do we develop our organizational capacities for emerging technologies? And by this, it means the people, the management process, and the foresight. The people, management process, and foresight. How do we develop our organizational capacities for emerging technologies? Dr. Sakah, the questions are two for you, but maybe you can put them together as one and answer them. The first one is, what's our role? What is our role in the bigger conversation on how technology governs and impacts society? What is our role in the bigger conversation on how technology governs and impacts society? And the second question is, how do we define a digital transformation process that makes sense for us? And I think they are all what's referring towards Africa. So Dr. Sakah, you can put it together for that. So we would take from Professor Olubode, then after that we'll take Dr. Justine, Dr. Sakah, then Kwame, then you come in, please. Okay, so Prof.
Now, my own is to ask a question. And,
okay, Prof.
My question is this. I was lecturing the postgraduate students on procurement management. But I discovered that the African country particularly, we have not embraced e-procurement system. And this lack of embracing e-procurement system has led to so much corruption in our procurement system. My question there is, why is it that African countries, we are not embracing emerging technology in our procurement system?
Okay, Dr. Justine, I think you add that to your question. You add that to your question and you answer it. So Dr. Justine.
Thank you. I will start by contributing to what Dr. Sakah the response that he gave to His Royal Highness on where do we start from the present scenario in Africa. African governments are so good in terms of making strategy documents. If you go into any African country, whatever ministry, you see a lot of impressive strategic documents. And embedded in these strategic documents are the issues of innovation and industrialization, meaning they fully appreciate these things and they talk about these things. But the dilemma that we have is the issue of misplaced priorities and sheer ignorance, where our leaders put on paper that we are having an innovation agenda, and the innovation agenda is to capacitate different industries in terms of emerging technologies. But they forget about that document as they pursue other self-interests. Until the time we go towards elections or they need to be reappointed to offices again, they come back to those documents. So we need to deal with these behavioral issues. The challenge that we have in Africa is the issue of the way we are addressing behavioral issues. Behavioral issues need to be tackled from multi-dimensional perspective. It's not like leaders don't know the significance of technology. They know, but they are ignoring as they are focusing on their own individual ambitions. So the issue of sensitization, which Dr. Sakah indicated, becomes of primary importance. Research and development is fundamental, is the bedrock, as the Royal Highness is indicating. But to what extent are our African governments, our organizations, putting priority towards research and development? We go back to the strategy documents, the action plans, we see research in those documents, but it's not being implemented. You go into any organization, they have research and development departments, but nothing is happening. And Mr. Danielson indicated that we need 100 billion in Africa in order to improve emerging technology. What is 100 billion in 54 countries in Africa? 100 billion in 54 countries is nothing. But we see 100 billion as a lot of money. It's nothing when we put 54 countries in Africa together, but we have misplaced priorities. And we are this month, we are talking about the integration of the African continent. Where is the integration of the African continent when the whole 54 countries can't raise 100 billion? Some of us who have wider dreams are even dreaming of having 100 billion in our bank accounts. And 54 countries in Africa are struggling to have 100 billion in their accounts. So we need to revisit our mindset as Africans and start not this idea of fetishizing irrelevance and seeing 100 billion as a lot of money from 54 countries in Africa, not in other regions of the world. 54 countries in Africa, Africa for that matter. So we need to revisit our mindset and re-engineer our thinking as African leaders at different levels of society. Coming to the issue of developing organizations for emerging technology, I will answer that through inquiry and engagement. At different organizational levels, we need to inquire and see what is working in our organizations, engage the different stakeholders in a real transformative agenda, not the mere issue of just engaging for the sake of engaging people in organizations, not inquiry for the sake of inquiring, just people want to get money when they go out for research and they are paid some allowances and they write some good reports at the end of the day, and in the end, nothing is implemented. So we need to revisit those issues and ensure that we are transformative in our agenda. And I think that answers as well the question from Prof. Olubode regarding the e-technologies. It's something that our organizations should just be implementing if we have the right mindset and we set our priorities right in that respect.
Okay, Dr. Justine, quick one. This is just a follow-up to what your question from Eric Apau Asante. Eric Apau Asante. What is the best approach to managing employees who wouldn't flow along with any technological interventions you introduce into your institution as a leader in these times? Such people often go with the excuse code, BBC, born before computer.
Right, it comes back to the issue of how we are implementing these things. If you work in an organization where people just come and execute on certain agendas without the engagement, without inquiry, without the involvement of the people engaged, there is resistance. And we need to understand that people go through behavioral change process. If you bring a new idea today, don't expect Dr. Justin to accept it tomorrow. If I am a reasonable person, I will not accept an idea that comes today, and tomorrow I accept it. It goes through a process of behavioral change, of critical analysis, of you making sense out of that issue. But if you have sycophants in your organization, you tell them do X, they do, without questioning. And eventually we hit the brick wall. But we need employees who are critical, involve them, get into discussions with them before the implementation. And there will be resistance. Dr. Sakah indicated that in his presentation. Resistance will always be there, but we need to understand these are behavioral issues, and behavioral issues will not be solved by one approach. That's why there is no best approach. If we are dealing with the motivational speakers that I said earlier, they will tell you there's a best approach. There's no best approach in talent management. There's no best approach in talent development. It's all situational. It's all context specific. So it comes back to inquiry and engagement.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Justine. We'll go to Dr. Sakah. After Dr. Sakah, we will move to Kwame. Then Prof. Nanefia, well, we've seen your hand up. Then Prof. Nanefia will also come in. Dr. Sakah.
Okay,
Dr. Sakah,
thank
your question.
you.
Can you mute yourself? Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I had some technical issues. So I think the question is about the role that each and every one of us has to play, right?
Yes. In
Okay,
technology
so like I said,
governance and impact, yes.
Yes. So I think I would just want to cue up from where Dr. Justine ended. And like I said, it's about knowing our position, knowing our interest, and of course, assuming responsibility beyond just talking. If you're an organization, for instance, an NGO, and you know very well that the world has changed, you know very well that to reach out to your beneficiaries, to your clients, you need new ideas that meet with prevailing environment. You have colleagues and you don't want to embrace ideas from them. You're failing in your responsibility. You have to be more transparent. You have to embrace ideas, contributions, and this has to come through constantly engaging them and creating that enabling environment for ideas to flow in. And this is similar to government because there are many young people out there, for instance, who are burning with very impressive ideas, who want to invent, who want to challenge the status quo, but the environment is not favorable for them to do so. So you will see that, for instance, the government needs to create an enabling environment and provide resources to, of course, enhance some of the inventions or technological innovations that citizens may come up with. But also, as corporate bodies, our corporate social responsibility also entails that we invest in some of such initiatives. Research and development, for instance, it's not something that only the government would invest or have interest in. It's about every entity. And as individuals, you see that at our different levels, it could be even at the mere level of advocating so that African governments, for instance, can use or utilize our resources to realize whether it's a $100 billion project or not, we have the resources. So you see that it's about the consciousness of the role that we have to play and being responsible enough to embark on playing such a role. And I think on the question of definition, it's simply ideas, tools, instruments, concepts, and processes that enhance transformation in a given setting, and this most especially when it comes to service delivery or production. I think that does it. And on the question of, or comment maybe, on e-procurement, why do African governments not want to embrace? I think it goes back to why we resist change. And most African governments, I think, are still threatened by, of course, emerging technologies for reasons we best know. We want to shield corruption. We want to foster embezzlement, and so on and so forth. So the time we want to embrace good governance, it means that we'll be able to embrace such practices as e-procurement. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So we'll bring in Kwame. After Kwame, Prof. Nanefia, then Mr. Tabani comes in. So Kwame, can you unmute your microphone and give us a contribution?
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Adams. Please, I was going to make a contribution to the question asked by His Royal Highness concerning how we can handle data and the best way to analyze them, since data is very critical to the growth of every organization or government or country. Now, I would like to say that times have passed. In this day and age in which we are now, we are looking at huge volumes and sources of data, which are coming in from various means. We can talk about from our business transactions, we get data from those sides. We can also talk about the smart devices we use today, which are IoT, Internet of Things. And apart from that, industrial equipment, videos, social media, this and more, these are all huge sources of data today. What it means is that we need a huge storage platform to be able to store all this data. So that has brought about what we call big data and then data science, which started somewhere from the 2000s to where we are now. Now, so what it means is that critical to the growth of every organization today must be interested in having data scientists or data analytics who can be able to process and refine this data to useful information that can be used for the growth of every organization or country. So I think that this is something that every organization or institution should be looking at. Thank you.
Thank you. Prof. Nanefia.
Thank you very much.
Hello.
Yes, Prof.
Hello, Prof.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Prof.
I've been following the conversations that are going on. I have a problem, and my issue is about attitudes, especially in relation to internet usage. These emerging technologies depend on honesty, integrity. But here we are, for instance, in Ghana, in my institution, there have been several times when underground cables, fiber optic cables have been stolen. They lay them, within a short time, they are gone. There's interruption of connectivity, and even if you have all the gadgets, it doesn't work. Imprisonment doesn't seem to be working. So what do our presenters suggest should be done in this case? Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
I will start.
Thank you, Prof.
So,
I will start, then Dr. Sakah will finish. I will finalize that. Again, I think I'll hammer back.
Dr. Jaisty,
yes.
I wanted us to take one from Mr. Tabani, and after that, we'll come to you for the answers.
Okay.
Mr. Tabani.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Adams. Good afternoon, Madam Genevieve. Good afternoon, everyone. My contribution is centered on the 100 billion for the internet infrastructure. In Africa, there's a wide gap in terms of technological development in Africa. Most African governments are still in the Stone Age era. They have not yet implemented or embraced the technology in government departments. Secondly, we have research and development in most African countries, but yet we are not investing in research and development. That's where there is a big problem. That's why as African continent, we are crying, we are mourning. Now we are in the COVID era, and we are still waiting for the European guys, the Western world, to develop, to come up with the best medicine. While our doctors are not doing anything, our presidents are not doing anything to reactivate. They are not doing anything. They're just waiting. So I think it's good for us as Africans to wake up and we start to invest more in research and development. Look, 100 billion is not a lot of money in Africa. Like for instance, Nigeria is number 10 in the world in terms of oil reserves. We've got so many countries that have got abundance of gold. So my point is 100 billion is a lot of money. It's not a lot of money in Africa. Only one country can invest, only one country can plow that 100 billion in technology development. But the reason is that our leaders, they are not willing. Our leaders, they are not yet ready to do that, because it's difficult for them to invest 100 billion or 100 billion, while in their countries, they're still using the files. That there are no any investment in technology. So the current crop of leadership we have is a big challenge for Africa. We need to change the mindset. We need to revisit the leadership narrative in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
We
you,
need to
Dr. Bani.
revisit the leadership narrative. Exactly. Thank you so much.
Dr. Justine.
Please. Okay.
Can you unmute yourself, Dr. Justine?
Dr. Justine.
Yes, responding to Professor Nana's comment.
Thank you.
The issue of cables being stolen is an issue that comes as a result of a conspiracy of issues that we need to address. But the only solution, the quick fix that our governments are having is that issue of imprisonment. And you rightfully said imprisonment is not working. Why imprisonment is not working is because this issue is a result of a conspiracy of issues. Are we attending to all the issues that are leading Dr. Justin to then go and steal the cables? Or we are just saying, Justin, don't steal cables? The youth in Africa needs employment. The youth in Africa need to be capacitated. The youth in Africa need a whole lot to be done. I indicated that we have a whole lifetime of people being wasted. People were born in poverty and they are still in poverty. And addressing this issue is not a quick fix issue. It's not an overnight issue. We need our governments to be serious about development. And in being serious about development, these issues are going to be there and they will eventually vanish when we attend to the issues, when youths are capacitated in terms of their cognitive abilities, in terms of their attitudes, in terms of their abilities. But we are focusing on attitude development without attending to the cognitive development, without attending to the abilities, and we expect the youth to be transformed. So if we are to address the issues in Africa, these are behavioral issues that needs a conspiracy of interventions, numerous interventions in order to bring these issues to finality. Or else we are going to have more of these cables being stolen and nothing is going to change. Unless we address this issue in total, we need whole system interventions. Our leaders should have a whole system mindset in addressing these issues.
Thank you so much.
Please,
The mindset thing keeps repeating itself. So the mindset, we really got to change it. Dr. Asare Bediako, is there any other person you want to talk, please?
Well, I think, let me just ask Dr. Justin.
Yes, please. I had wanted to say something small about the cable theft.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you very much. So please, concerning the cable theft, these days we actually have two key types of transmission media we use in the telecom industry, which is the copper cables and then the fiber optics. Now, the copper cables, because they are made of pure copper, the theft of that cable was very high. But luckily, security surveillance systems deployed by the telecom industries today, unlike before, we used to have manned security at the various base stations or sites. That has changed. We introduced the padlock system, and now we have quite a very different approach altogether, including CCTV surveillance systems. So security has beefed up. Now, in the wisdom of growth of technology, now we have fiber optics cable, which is made of glass, literally. Now, what it means is that the value of stealing a fiber optic cable is nothing compared to that of copper. So today, And because of how fiber optic cable is also laid, it is laid underground. At least you dig to about 1 meter or 2 beneath the ground to a stretch from point to point. So for someone to really steal a fiber optic cable today, meaning the person needs to do a lot of work by digging quite a long stretch. So what happens these days is that rather, because of our attitudinal problems and unregulated activities, people digging at any point across the street or the road, it has made it possible that most of these cables are cut. Now, let me say that fiber optic cable and copper cable and microwave radio are the 3 main means of connectivity of the various base stations together. That is interconnectivity, moving traffic from one base station all the way to the other and all the way to the core network. So once you cut the fiber optic cable, automatically you create a synapse between communication, meaning that those who are on the other side are completely cut out. You can't make calls, you can't receive anything, and you can't also access data. So I think that part of it must also be on the part of government to ensure that there's regulation regarding, who does what on the road, public places where fiber optic cables have been laid. So I think that there's a bit of, proactiveness that must come on the part of citizens and government as well in ensuring that our network connectivity is always available for us to use all the time when needed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kwame.
Dr. Shegun.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Justin, for your presentation, Dr. Sakah for your presentations, and all the input so far. I want to just make some contribution to the questions asked by our participants. I appreciate the last response from Mr. Daniel Kwame in response to Professor Nana's questions about using ICT to boost security in our various telecommunications network so as to reduce the rate of theft. That's what I wanted to suggest earlier for Professor Nana, and that's a good one. On the question that Mr. Danielson asked on issue of 100 billion investment, all those things, I want you to know that in Africa, we have these resources. But one of our challenges is collaboration. In regards to what Professor Nana said yesterday, collaboration is very key. If you want to go into source investment, you need to collaborate, if possible, with the minister in charge of information and communication in your country. You need to work towards having a better synergy with them. It's not an investment that you can just do on your own, even when you have the money, without cooperation with them, because in stakeholder analysis, they are major stakeholders. So proper collaboration with the government of the land through the Minister of Information or Minister of Telecommunication in various states can enhance the possibility of that investment. On the issue of question of His Royal Highness, or on the issue of using data, one of the challenges we have in this country is that we don't use result-based monitoring evaluation. If we use result-based monitoring evaluation from the model of result-based framework, where you have input, process, you have output, you have outcome and impacts. In this part of the world, we stop at output. We don't bother about the impact, and we don't bother about the what? The outcome. So nobody is holding some people responsible. If we begin to hold our government officials, our politicians, our leaders responsible, they will sit tight and make use of all this data. The data are there. We have the data, but how are we making use of them? You put somebody in charge. What is that person doing? Nobody is holding him responsible. And we don't go back to check the impact of the project. That is why it looks as if we are not seeing results. Then on the question of when some people are not finding it difficult to adjust to change in an organization, in my submission yesterday, I said change is a process. Everybody cannot change at the same time. No matter the ideology, no matter the strategy you use, all the staff cannot change at the same pace, at the same time. So you need to understand how to work with individual. You need coaching of individual. You need to understand that we have individual temperament, individual nature. So you need to understudy those individuals. You don't just cut them off. Then on the submission of Dr. OK on e-procurement, our law need to be looked into. How many of our law has accommodate the usage of e-technology for election, for procurement, for one thing or the other? It has not been adjusted in our law. It has not been effective in our constitution. So until this is done, e-procurement may be difficult because we have an act. For example, in this country, we have Procurement Act. How many of you supported you using e-procurement? The answer is no. So until we look into the policy, the constitutions, we adjust some of the laws that we created. So we may not. For example, now, no matter how brilliant e-procurement is possible, election-wise, Nigerians find it difficult to embrace technology for election. They are still manipulating it because the law has not taken care of some things. So the country needs to look at the law and make adjustment on it. I want to thank all participants. I want to appreciate all my senior colleagues, and I want to say job well done. I want to also appreciate Dr. Olawale attending our meeting today. I want to appreciate everyone. This is just my input for today. God bless you.
So God bless you too, Dr. Shengu. Thank you so much. I think on this note, we can quickly wrap up. Dr. Bediako, please, if you don't have anything for us, can I quickly wrap up?
Yeah, let's take the last one from Dr. Sakah. Now, after the last one from Dr. Sakah, we'll give an announcement. After the announcement, then you wrap up. Yes.
All right. Thank you so much.
Dr. Sakah. Okay, I think Dr. Sakah is off again because we are trying to get him. He sounds okay. He's off again. So now this is the announcement. Quick announcement for today. Those of us who want to be given seminar certificates plus the slides, those who want the slides and the certificates, kindly get in touch with your country director. So if you are in Kenya, you get in touch with your country director in Kenya. The contacts are there on our website and other places. If you are in Nigeria, get in touch with Nigeria, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Ghana, Cameroon. Try and get in touch with your country director. And as you get in touch with your country director, your seminar materials, now we might even include videos as well. So it will be given to you for a token. Just know that this summit itself is free, but the certificates and the other materials that will be given to you will be basically given to you for a token. Dr. Sakah, are you with us now?
Yes, Dr. Asare, sorry for that technical issue. I think okay. I just wanted...
So we take... Yes. Okay, so
Dr.
Sakah, Jenny, you can wrap up.
Wrap up, all right, thank you.
I just wanted to add something with respect to security. And I think cyberspace is a global space. And security efforts in this space need to be more global as well. So with the issue of theft, I think governments have to go beyond protecting their sovereignties or territorial integrities to collaborate more when it comes to surveillance, when it comes to any mechanism that is geared towards checking any such theft or threat on cyberspace. Without such global efforts, and in the level of Africa, without such collaboration, it will be difficult really also to be able to prevent such theft. So it should have a global, approach to fighting this. And again, the question of regulation, we have to be careful also with government because most African governments have regulations in place, but the application is where the problem lies. So we have to be sure that the regulations in place are not those that rather would hamper the very process of developing the various digital technologies. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm sure you all agree with me that it's been a great day. It's been a good session. And I'll say it's been very great for all the 3 days. For the purposes of those who could not join us the first 2 days, I'll have a quick recap for the first 4 speakers who we had before today's own, before Dr. Sakah. So wrapping up, I'll say I'm taking a quote from each. So from Dr. Oliver, what I took away was, you can't satisfy a customer you don't know. You can't satisfy a customer you do not know. From Dr. Shengu, Don't be reactive to change, but plan on how to mitigate the resistance. From Professor Nana, we don't want just leaders, but leaders who can